So I recently purchased one of those new MSI QD OLED monitors at 500 Hz. I'm here to tell you what it's like to play some games at 500 frames a second. I tested several games known to approach or exceed the frame rates I saw on my previous Asus ROG 240 Hz OLED display. And though I recently played through the amazing Silent Hill 2 remake, let's focus for now on frame rates outside of Unreal Engine 5 games. Playing Unreal Engine 5 games at 500 frames a second at even medium to high settings doesn't seem possible for a very long time. So if you're watching this video in 2032 and thinking to yourself, I can play at least 10 Unreal Engine 5 games at 500 FPS, what's this guy talking about? Check the dates, please check the dates. I knew that I was likely going to need to test older games, very well optimized, more recent games, and games that just didn't require me to max out my PC and make it sound like a train anytime I played. I wanted so badly to test stuff like Red Dead Redemption 2 to see how far I could push that, even at medium settings. It's one of the few games to me at medium settings doesn't really look all that bad. But unfortunately, Red Dead Redemption 2 has problems when playing at an FPS higher than around 120 to 130 FPS. My menu and my map, for example, start to become very sluggish, making it hard to navigate and do simple tasks. Usually playing the game itself is fine, but if you need to do anything in the menu, it's just a mess. Rockstar probably thought not many people would want to push beyond that or play at extremely low settings just to turn the frame rate into maniac mode, I guess. In my case, they were half right. I don't really want to play any of the games I tested and enjoy at settings much lower than I already play them at now. And don't get me wrong, I can max out tons of games that I own and experience zero issues. I'm just one of those that like to optimize and make sure that I'm getting as much performance as possible in most of the games that I play. One could argue that monitors like this new MSI are more aimed at highly competitive gamers, and there's truth in that. Still, someone who casually plays competitive games and really likes the single-player stuff shouldn't be left out, so I bought one anyway. One of my first thoughts was Valve games. I really enjoy Valve games. I still think a good chunk of those look great. And as with any other display, I wanted to see how their games look beyond 144 to 240 FPS. Imagine my disappointment when I discovered that games like Left 4 Dead 2, Half-Life 2, and even Portal 2, if I'm not mistaken, are all limited to 300 FPS. 300 FPS is a great place to be. I'm not complaining about 300 FPS, and it still looks great on this monitor. And while I can feel a difference between 240 and 300, it's more of a latency thing. And it's obviously, when you're seeing it, it's not quite as large as the difference between something like 30 to 60 or even 60 to 144. The biggest change I think a lot of people will feel at playing at really high frame rates is the responsiveness you feel in your controller and your mouse and keyboard. It's those things that are something you can feel as well as something you can see. The other big thing that works in tandem with those is animation quality. It really helps when you're dealing with a game that had some very talented people working on it and animations were just, at the top of their priority list. Even boomer shooters that can often be really simple in what they do, a lot of times those games have really awesome animations. But even if the animations are just okay, even if they're just decent, they still look insanely better the higher you go in frame rate. Many of the competitive games were designed to run at extremely high frame rates, ranging from 144 to 240 FPS, sometimes a lot more. A lot of your single-player, story-driven games weren't developed with that kind of care in mind. I think some of it has to do with developers, considering console development when making a game and how a good chunk of that audience can't play beyond 60 FPS anyway. And there are some gamers out there that say that they still can't even see a difference between 30 and 60, which is crazy. Sometimes, I don't know, man, I think these people might be lying to us, themselves, or both, because the statistics show that when given the option, console gamers almost always choose performance, like 70-80% of the time. But the console thing, the single-player story-driven experience thing is something that you need to be aware of, because let's look at a title like Uncharted 4. I'll start with the praise. For a 2016 game, it still looks better than a lot of the AAA slop we have coming out these days, especially in terms of its animation quality. No denying Naughty Dog is, one of the best. They take pride in their animations, and it shows. Now, this game runs very fast if you have a more recent PC. It does. I would never say it's not an optimized game because I believe it to be one of the better efforts, even if the settings are a little boring. But this is a good example of when a game wasn't designed with really high frame rates in mind, weird wonky things begin to happen. Sometimes they're game breaking, sometimes just a little bit annoying, but often they're just immersion breaking. Let's take a look here at the rope on Drake's side in this scene. Locking the game to 80 to 90 FPS doesn't cause much of a problem at all. When attempting to play well beyond that, you see how physics and game logic start to break down while still keeping an eye on his rope. This isn't a knock on Naughty Dog or the team that, helped work on this port. It's certainly not exclusive to Uncharted 4 on PC, but something that you should be aware of when playing games well beyond 60 FPS. After seeing this and being disappointed by the Valve games locked at 300 FPS, I made it my mission to try more and more games. I knew that my stubbornness would cost me a bit because I really didn't want to lower settings in any of the games I tested, because those optimized visuals that I've already chosen for these games are my personal preference. I was able to get a game like Doom Eternal to occasionally surpass the 240 FPS mark of the previous monitor. Then I told myself that I could definitely set the settings to lower medium and maybe get it into that 400 FPS range. My stubbornness would not allow this, so I moved on. I know that Dead Space 2 is a 14-year-old game at this point, but it always ran extremely well. Even on my 2600K at the time, I believe that's what I was still using, I remember being able to play and record 60 FPS with fraps. How many of you jokers remember fraps, alright? Fraps, come on. Fraps used to be like the default must-have frame rate counter for many of us gaming on PC, it just was. So Dead Space 2 can definitely reach the 350 to 500 FPS mark very often. I did find it a bit interesting that such an old game that was very well optimized and looked incredible from the start just won't lock at 500 FPS in 2025. Then I remembered something. Just for fun, on other displays I've played a few of the Halo games at well over 300 and 400 FPS on older systems. And there it was. I can play games like Halo 2 and 3 at well over 200, 300 FPS. These games are great. Those Bungie Halo titles always had some really solid visuals and animation, so I knew that I was in for a treat. It made a lot of sense to me in my head that a lot of the games I'd be able to push, beyond 240 and come anywhere close to 500 would be older games, first-person games, or both. I didn't sit down and play through both of these campaigns just for this video, but I spent a little bit of time and just wanted to see how much I could push the performance. And with that, I can't say whether or not there's, game logic problems while playing at such high frame rates for long periods of time. Halo 2's remade visuals are actually quite good, and I knew it was a big step up from 3, so I knew that would be a little bit more of a challenge. As you can see, it still looks and runs amazingly well for its age. Without sacrificing settings, Halo 3 is even better for performance, even if it doesn't look as good. I even decided to unlock the frame rate with Halo 3 because I knew that I'd be able to go well beyond 500. I just wanted to see what I could do, and I was getting frame rates between 700 and 800 FPS. So yeah, the Halo games far exceeded expectations. Everything about them plays and looks great at 500 FPS. I started to think about games that looked really good but were even more simple than some of the shooters. The two Ori games came to mind and are very impressive on this monitor. Very often staying between 400 and 500 FPS. The first game I knew would be a no-brainer because it's a bit older and it isn't quite as impressive as the second title. It's just not. Then I remembered, damn, they got the second title running on the Series X at 4K 60 to 120 FPS. For what it is, the sequel is one of the more impressive looking games I've ever seen. I knew if a console that is significantly, and I mean significantly weaker than my PC can run this game, with that kind of performance, my PC will ace this game. And I was correct, both the first game and the sequel, do very, very well on this PC. The sequel to Ori and the Blind Forest on an OLED has to be seen to be believed anyway. These animations are gorgeous, and you'd have to be blind or some kind of strange hater to say otherwise. Sticking with those, more simple, less taxing platformers in mind, Hollow Knight and Silksong did very well in the very, very little time that I spent with those. They're a lot less intensive than, I guess, say Ori, for example, but they're beautiful games regardless. Before I talk about the performance in a handful of other games, it's important to keep in mind that even if you can take full advantage of the monitor and run at frame rates as high as 500 FPS, in some cases less than that, you're going to be constantly pushing your system to 99% for all of that performance. And depending on what kind of gamer you are, depending on what you want to see, you may not need all of that for a lot of your games. Anyway, so I also fired up BioShock Infinite. You guys have seen me talk about many of the Unreal Engine 3 games and how they still look pretty darn good, and I already knew from previous testing that I could probably push that to, really high performance. You would honestly be surprised how many more recent games come out and their frame rate is capped at 120, 240, and 300 FPS. And again, all of those are great places to be in terms of performance, but for example, like we talked about with the Valve games. A PC that's, 5 or 6 years old should be able to run those games well beyond their cap, but Valve doesn't allow for that. Counter-Strike is likely the only game where Valve has allowed for much higher FPS, and that's understandable. I know why they do it for that game. In games like that, Counter-Strike, with an already very talented player on a monitor like this one, you can do some special things, I'm sure. I even tried messing around in Tony Hawk for a bit. That game is also capped at 300 FPS. Look, I know. It's a simple skateboarding game. I just think they have some really good animations, and it would have been cool to see those at 500 FPS. The new Yooka-Laylee, I can get that up pretty high. It's a very impressive little platformer. What I can see, a remake of the original game, whatever they did here, it looks amazing. I've said this about a few other games in the past, but if I didn't know any better, I would think that Nintendo's best teams worked on this. It looks that good. There may be a time where I put up another video where there's, no commentary or very little commentary with, we'll say, 15 to 20 games, and try to remember to also include the settings that I used for each one of those, and keep the performance numbers up so everyone can see what I'm getting in each game and decide whether or not you feel like, oh man, I gotta see this game at 500 FPS. The question becomes, is 500 hertz monitors, OLED or otherwise, worth it? Some games are capped at a certain frame rate. Some engines don't allow you to go beyond that. There's tweaks and mods, I'm sure. But just know when you start messing around with things like that, you can often break game logic, physics, and so on and so forth. I'll tell you that my answer is yes, because even to be able to play beyond 300 FPS, 400 FPS is something I didn't think I would consider a big deal, but I do. The less latency you have, the better the experience. The better animations appear at high frame rates, the better your experience. Side note, at least at this point in time, my favorite thing about this monitor is actually not that it's capable of 500 FPS in some games. It's that this monitor is a QD OLED and not just an OLED. Take it from someone with experience in OLED TVs and monitors. Only go OLED if you're planning on buying a TV. QD OLED is far superior for monitors right now, in my opinion. Things like that may change with some of the 2026 displays coming soon. Though if you care about, image quality, colors, QD OLED is the way to go, especially if it's 500 FPS. Whether something this expensive is worth it or not depends on you. I can say that it's worth it for me, and some of you value my opinion, but without experiencing something this awesome for yourself, it's difficult for a YouTuber to say, yeah, sure, go nuts and buy this thing. My answer is the same as when people ask, is 1440p still worth it? Yes, but it depends on what you want, what you value most, and what games you're gonna play. You're not gonna play Assassin's Creed Shadows even at medium settings and get 500 FPS. I don't know, maybe that's possible on a 5090 or something, unlikely, but it's just not gonna happen. I don't want gamers to go in watching this video and expecting games like that, or Red Dead Redemption, Dying Light the Beast, and The Last of Us all to run at 400 FPS or something. The chances of it happening, even with the lowest settings and making your game look awful, are slim. I don't think you'd want to ruin that experience for yourself and play at those really low settings. A lot of games, their art direction just doesn't really work all that well at low settings. I would say that this monitor is for people who are either playing highly competitive games on a nice PC or enjoy throwing money at new displays so they can play older games that still look and play great. One thing to keep in mind, and I guess if you want, we can call it future-proofing, is that even if, your PC is only capable of getting a lot of games up to 120 or 140 FPS, those games will still look amazing on a monitor like this one because it's still high FPS and you're playing on QD OLED technology. Listen, man, if you guys like this video, you like what I'm doing here, please give me a like. I do appreciate that. If you disliked it, you know what to do there as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions about this monitor or one like it, I may be able to help, so leave those in the comment section. You guys take care. Have a good one. Peace.